sir.
Thank you. I'm Kent Scheidegger. I'm with the Criminal Justice Legal Foundation. I've been representing the victims of crime and their interests for about 30 years now. And let me echo what Ms. Salerno said. The victims that I've represented are definitely not motivated by hate. They are motivated by justice. You'll meet one of them this afternoon, and you can judge for yourself. We are once again faced with a proposal that proposes to reduce the penalties for crime and promises to save big bucks. We've heard that before. We heard it with realignment, but those savings did not materialize. The LA Times found in 2014 that the realignment was estimated to save $1.4 billion, and actually there was an increase of $2 billion. So it is a huge mistake to swallow uncritically claims of large savings. Many estimates are guesswork, and more importantly, the estimates, even the LAO's estimate, fail to consider offsetting costs. Policies have direct costs and they have indirect costs. The indirect costs may be more difficult to measure, but they are no less real. For example, look at the possibility of plea bargains and the effect of a death penalty repeal on those. There are 7 times as many people in California prisons for life without parole as there are on death row. Many of those cases were plea bargained to avoid the death penalty. That's why else would a person accept a plea bargain to life without parole other than to avoid the death penalty? I have not been able to get any data specifically from California on the count of how many there are in that category, but I did a prior study using national data and found that 19% of cases were resolved with a plea to life in prison or equivalent in cities that had the death penalty, and that dropped down to 5% in cities that don't have the death penalty. So if you repeal the death penalty, you're not going to get these plea bargains to life without parole in anywhere near the same numbers, and those cases are going to have to go to trial. Those defendants will be entitled to appeals. They will be entitled to file habeas corpus petitions for the rest of their sentence, which is the rest of their life. And that is an offsetting cost that is very difficult to measure, but yet very real. Another offsetting cost is health care costs. We all know that health care costs rise exponentially with age. We know that for people who die of natural causes, the last year of life is particularly expensive. I did an analysis, and I sent it to the LAO, showing or estimating that a death row inmate would cost in health care $160,000 if executed within a reasonable time, and at $1.4 million in health care per inmate if sentenced to life without parole instead. We don't see that in their analysis. A lot of the talk in the previous panel was discussing the status quo. One thing we can all agree on is that the status quo is unacceptable. Fortunately, we know for sure the status quo will not continue. One of these initiatives or the other is going to be law in November. We can pretty much count on that. So comparisons to the status quo aren't really the point anymore. There has been a long pipeline in California. It's taken a long time for a lot of these cases to come out, but they are coming to the end of the pipeline, and we will be seeing executions step up substantially if the death penalty is retained. There's about 16 to 18 ready to go as soon as the protocol issue is resolved, and the protocol has been written, finally, as a result of a lawsuit I had to bring on behalf of victims. There are dozens more in the last stages of review. The federal cases that predate Congress's reform of the federal process are finally being flushed out of the system, and we can expect that a substantial number of the sentences rendered will be executed from this point forward. Experiences of other states was questioned earlier. We don't have the kind of detailed data from other states post-repeal that would allow us to really do an analysis of what was saved or not saved. But we do see at the macro level, we can tell state by state what portion of a state's budget goes to the justice system. And looking at states that have repealed the death penalty before and after and comparing those to national averages, we see no difference. In other words, if there is any savings, it's not leaving the justice system and going to education or whatever. So if anybody is claiming that savings could go to such other non-justice purposes, that's not consistent with the experience that we see in the other states. So these savings are likely illusory, as they were for realignment. Mr. Peterson mentioned incapacitation, and I also want to mention that there are cases of people, both in California and in other states, who have been sentenced to life in prison and who have killed again, either after escaping from prison, committing the murder within prison, arranging the murder from within prison, and in one case of a serial killer in Texas, after he was released as a result of prison overcrowding litigation. The claim being made that life without parole is absolute and people absolutely never will get out, I can tell you, if the death penalty is abolished on a Tuesday this November, the attack on life without parole will begin on Wednesday. We have already seen it with the under 18 murderers. We have practically no life without parole now for anybody who was under 18 at the time of the crime. So with that, I think this proposal is basically to sell out justice and to give us counterfeit coins in repayment, and I do hope the people of California will reject it.
Thank you. And we'll now have